are these people?
We're going to talk about the assurances that the U.S. gave the U.K. recently. As you can tell, they might involve some bull and the poop emoji. So keep that in mind as we read through these. You will find out what we mean by that. But anyway, so I brought Joe Lauria from Consortium News, one of the better journalists that keeps up with Assange, as there are many. But he writes U.S. issues assurances on Assange. So let's get into what he means. The United States Embassy on Tuesday filed 2 assurances with the British Foreign Office saying it would not seek the death penalty against imprisoned WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange and would allow Assange the ability to raise and seek to reply upon at trial the rights and protections given under the First Amendment, according to the U.S. diplomatic note. This sentence, keep that in mind. We're going to go over that in a second.
The ability to raise and seek to reply
upon a trial. Yes.
What does that mean?
I wish I knew. I wish we knew. So Assange's wife, Stella Assange, said the note makes no undertaking to withdraw the prosecution's previous assertion that Julian has no First Amendment right because he is not a U.S. citizen. Instead, she said, the U.S. has limited itself to blatant weasel words, claiming that Julian can seek to raise the First Amendment if extradited. You ever heard any legal stuff talking about seek to raise before?
No, but that's why actually, I have to look this up. What does that mean?
Feel free. I mean, I think it's just bring it up. He can mention it, right? He can mention the First Amendment. Like, it doesn't mean we take it into account, is what it sounds like. You can raise the effort, right? But she continues, the note contains a hollow statement, namely that Assange can try to raise the First Amendment at trial and at sentencing. But the U.S. Department of Justice can't guarantee he would get those rights, which is precisely what it must do under British extradition law based on the European Convention on Human Rights. So, the U.S. Department of Justice is legally restricted to assure a free speech guarantee to Assange equivalent to Article 10 of the European Convention, which the British court is bound to follow, but without that assurance, Assange should be free, according to British Crown Prosecution Service comment on extradition. So, in USAID versus Alliance for Open Society, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2020 that non-U.S. citizens outside the U.S. don't possess constitutional rights. Both former CIA Director Mike Pompeo and Gordon Cromberg, Assange's U.S. prosecutor, have said Assange does not have First Amendment protection. Because of the separation of powers in the United States, the executive branch's Justice Department can't guarantee to the British court what the U.S. judicial branch decides about the rights of a non-U.S. citizen in court, said Marjorie Cohn, law professor and former president of the National Lawyers Guild. Let's assume that the Biden administration does give assurances that he would be able to raise the First Amendment and that the High Court found that those were significant assurances, Cohn told Consortium News. That reality doesn't mean anything, because one of the things that the British courts don't understand is the U.S. doctrine of separation of powers. The prosecutors can give all the assurances they want, but the judiciary, another one of these branches of government in the U.S., doesn't have to abide by the executive branch's claim or assurance. Okay? I say that rules in favor of both of the assurances, myself personally. Right? So it doesn't matter what the executive branch says. They can do whatever they fucking want in the courts. Right?
Right.
So, regardless of assurances. So, in other words, whether Assange can rely on the First Amendment or not getting the death penalty in his defense in the U.S. court is up to that court, not Cromberg or the Department of Justice, which issued the assurance on Tuesday. The United States has issued a non-assurance in relation to the First Amendment. Right? So, Assange's legal team now has the right to challenge the credibility and validity of the U.S. assurances filed on Tuesday. The U.S. would then have a right to reply to Assange's legal submission to the court, which will hold a hearing on May 20th, save that date, to determine whether or not to accept the U.S. assurances. If the court does, Assange can be put on a plane to the U.S. theoretically that day. If not, Assange would be granted a full appeal against the Home Office 2022 order to extradite him. Assange is wanted in the U.S. on 17 charges under the 1917 Espionage Act and one on conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. He faces up to 175 years in a U.S. dungeon. The diplomatic note does nothing to relieve our family's extreme distress about his future. His grim expectation of spending the rest of his life in isolation in a U.S. prison for publishing award-winning journalism, Stella said. In its 66-page ruling on March 26, the two High Court judges wrote Kronberg wouldn't have said Assange would be without First Amendment right to trial unless that was a tenable agreement that the prosecution was entitled to deploy with a real prospect of success. If such an argument were to succeed, it would, at least arguably, cause the applicant, Assange, prejudice on the grounds of his non-U.S. citizenship. Remember when we covered what they said they wouldn't allow extradition over, right? Remember, this is the stuff we were like, why are they bringing this part into this? About his, as an Australian citizen, right? And this is it. So, hence on the grounds of his nationality. Right? So, the applicant wishes to argue at any trial in the United States that his actions were protected by the First Amendment. He contends that if he is given First Amendment rights, the prosecution will be stopped. The First Amendment is therefore of central importance to his defense to the extradition trial. So they're relying on First Amendment rights. So, again, we have U.S. has filed assurances in Assange's extradition case, which were requested by a British court before it makes a final decision on its ability to appeal. Next step is a hearing on May 20th. More on what those assurances are about in our earlier story here. Stefania Marizzi, responding to Megan Spacia, with all due respect for Megan, I disagree with her tweet. While U.S. has submitted assurances that Assange won't face death penalty and discrimination, it has not provided any assurance that he will be protected by the First Amendment. Right? Very simple stuff.
Right.
So, and I also think because of what Joe Lauria brought up earlier, it doesn't matter either of the assurances. The courts can do what it wants.
Yes.
So, both of these are bullshit, in my opinion. But again, this raise and seek thing, did you find out what that meant? Raise and seek stuff? Okay, I think Joe Lauria pretty much said that he can, bring it to the court. They're gonna let him, essentially raise it as an argument.
Right.
But it doesn't mean they listen to it.
Right.
That's what it sounded like. So, an assurance that Assange can raise the First Amendment is completely meaningless. Anyone can raise anything in court. The U.S. reserves the right to argue that the First Amendment doesn't protect Assange and admits a U.S. judge could reach that conclusion. So, that's where we're at. So, I think that they're going to not accept these. I would imagine, since they asked specifically about that citizenship thing, which then means what? Assange sits in Belmarsh for longer.
Right.
Hopefully till after the election is what I'm betting. So, we'll see. But here's this bit. So, a sentence of death will neither be sought nor imposed on Assange. The United States is able to provide such assurances as Assange is not charged with a death penalty eligible offense, and the United States assures that he will not be tried for a death eligible offense. Remember, it doesn't matter what the executive says. The court can do what it wants. Right? I mean, am I missing something? Let me know.
No.
So again, here's Stella, right?
Stella!
She's talking about the seek to raise and the weasel words, you know. Diplomatic note does nothing to relieve our family's extreme distress about his future. Grim expectations of spending the rest of his life in isolation in U.S. prison for publishing award-winning journalism. The Biden administration must drop this dangerous prosecution before it is too late. Now, I did hear there's talks of him dropping it. I doubt that's accurate. Because, especially after the executive just sent this, which means they are continuing this trial. So, we have a lot of time before election season if Biden wants an easy win to try to pull some Democrats over that give a shit. But at this point, I doubt it. Anything you want to add before I get into a little bit more?
Well, I think, as you said, Biden, it's an they know, well, people are not talking about Assange as they should in mainstream media, but that doesn't mean that the administration is not aware of the significance of this. So, I think, as you said, Biden is just giving another carrot to kind of make it seem like, to that he actually really cares, when the reality is, I think, as you said, he's basically trying to kick the can down the road. God forbid that Trump gets in power again, that he doesn't have to deal with it. So, but I've said this many times. This is just their way of having Assange rot indefinitely until, so they don't want to deal with the
yesterday that he's the head on the spike in front of the castle, pretty much, so that's what it seems like. Essentially slow torture for everyone to see.
Right.
So Caitlin Johnstone, one of our favorites here, writes, so they're really doing it. The Biden administration is really ignoring Australia's request to end the case against Assange, and they're proceeding with their campaign to extradite a journalist for telling the truth about war crimes. In order to move the extradition case forward, per a British High Court ruling, U.S. prosecutors need to provide, quote, assurances that the U.S. would not seek the death penalty, would not deprive Assange of his human right to free speech because of his nationality. The U.S. provided the assurance against the death penalty, which they previously opposed doing, and for the free speech assurances, they said only that Assange will be able to raise and seek to rely on U.S. First Amendment rights, adding a decision as the applicability of the First Amendment is exclusively within the purview of the U.S. courts. Basically just saying, you're welcome to try to have free speech protection. They're just squeezing this man as hard as they can, for as long as they can, get away with to keep him silent and make an example of him to show what happens when journalists reveal unauthorized information about the empire. Just like Gaza, the persecution of Julian Assange makes a lie of everything the U.S. and its Western allies claim to stand for, and reveals the cool face of tyranny beneath the mask of liberal democracy. Any questions?
Nope.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
Misty, U.S. again, saying Assange can seek to rely upon the First Amendment as bunk. Assange can seek to rely upon a herd of goats in court if he wants. That's Kathleen McClellan, right, of Whisper. And Misty, he should seek to rely on a fairy flying out of the judge's ass and granting his freedom. Better chance of that than a fair trial. Kangaroo court bullshit. Free Assange. Right? So, I think that's just about everything. Meanwhile, Care Bear, the CIA director, William Burns, filed a state secrets privilege demand to withhold information in a lawsuit against the agency by 4 American journalists and attorneys who were spied on during their visits to Assange at the embassy in Ecuador. Ecuadorian embassy in London, sorry. State secrets privilege is a U.S. evidentiary rule designed to prevent courts from revealing state secrets during civil litigation. The CIA began the process of invoking it with the Assange lawsuit earlier this year. Here's what Burns argued, so pay attention. I am asserting the state secrets and statutory privileges in this case, as I have determined either admitting or denying that CIA has information implicated by the remaining allegations in the amended complaint, and response reasonably could be expected to cause serious and, in some cases, exceptionally grave damage to the national security of the United States. He's claiming it will break the security of the United States. That's what he's claiming. I don't know how. After deliberation and personal consideration, I have determined that the complete factual basis for my privileged assertions cannot be set forth on the public record without confirming or denying whether CIA has information relating to this matter, and therefore risking the very harm to U.S. national security that I seek to protect, he says. So, what? Huh?
Fuck you. Oh, fuck you, fuck you. Fuck you, fuck you. Fuck, 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 fuck.
So,
when did you put that on?
Yesterday. Jamie Foxx. May he rest in peace, because we know that new one's a clone. So, Caitlin Johnstone, which is obviously a load of horseshit, as Assange himself tweeted in 2017, overwhelming majority of information is classified to protect political security, not national security. Burns isn't worried about damaging the national security of the United States. He's worried about the potential political fallout from information about the CIA spying on American lawyers and journalists while visiting a journalist who's been actively targeted by the legal arm of the U.S. government. Political security is also why the U.S. is working to punish Julian Assange for publishing inconvenient facts about U.S. war crimes. The Pentagon already acknowledged years ago that the Chelsea Manning leaks, for which Assange is being persecuted, didn't get anyone killed and had no strategic impact on U.S. war efforts. So plainly, this isn't about national security. It's just politically damaging for the criminality of the U.S. government to the public for all to see. Sounds about right to me.
Yep.
So, but yeah, anything to add before we head out of this story?
I mean, it's, as you said, it's all bullshit, and it's just trying to make an end of the molehill of this situation. You can't, like, they're trying to muddy the waters so much that it's just, you know, like, if you were to see me, I probably saw me if I had question marks all over my face. I think that's generally the idea that anyone who cares about Assange is having right now. It's like, what the fuck are they doing? It's just, you know, I think it's just a way to, yeah, it's all of this stuff just because they can't justify keeping him in Belmarsh.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're trying to pull out anything out their ass to give the justification why either he has to stay there, or maybe to our government's benefit to extradite him here to be tried.
Yeah.
So
lost adult in the chat. Fun fact: the state secrets plea was first used to cover up negligent maintenance on the image of a B-17 in 1953. So that's they're running with that old trick, you know?
Right.
So, yay!
Yeah, it's just it is bullshit, and just free Assange. That's all. Like, ultimately, just
wouldn't it be nice? I agree. Free Assange. And saying these things is why we're demonetized. So you can always go to co-v.com to support us. You know, go to co-v.com/IndieNewsNetwork or scan the QR code on your screen or put !donate in chat. And I will do that now. Make sure that works. But yeah, you should be able to do those things. And if you can't support monetarily, you can just support us by liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting. You know, we're trying to get to 2K. We're getting there. You know, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already.